Okay, all right. Another episode with Mr. Shaun Joshua. Last time we spoke about politics, and this time it's going to be about religion. Because, of course,
Conversation this time is going to be more serious because honestly, politics at this point is just a joke. But yeah, let's try to indulge ourselves into something more serious discussion. Maybe something might come from this. Who knows?
for sure, for sure. Yes, sir. Now we talked about wanting to potentially look into the Abrahamic traditions as compared to the Eastern traditions for this one. And you being Christian too, you have some valuable insights, I believe, and I'm sure you have read through different um, different books, different scriptures, listened to different pastors, or gained different perspectives within the three traditions. Although you wouldn't call uh, a pastor from the Jewish community a pastor or Islamic community a pastor, but you get the idea. But yes, brother. So for those who are unaware of the Abrahamic traditions specifically, because lots of people I'm noticing in this modern day and age that they just know religion by the label. Oh yeah, he's Christian, he's Jewish, he's Islamic or Hindu, all of that, but they don't understand the core essence behind it, especially for this podcast since we're doing the Abrahamic standpoint. If you'd like to shed some light on the origin story, on how all of this began, what is the Torah, what is the difference between the Old and New Testament? So maybe when I say Abrahamic, maybe in this podcast we're focusing more on the Christian and the Jewish faith, right? So feel free to start off with that.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So, well, what are Abrahamic faiths? We can start with that. Abrahamic faiths are, this branch of monotheistic faiths that derive from, as the name suggests, this person. I mean, there's a lot of variations for his name. The Jews and the Christians both believe that him to be Abraham, but the Muslims, on the other hand, they say it is Ibrahim rather than Abraham.
Yeah.
But you can make an assumption that it's more of an Arabized version, the Hebrew name suggesting to be closer to what would sound like Abraham or Abraham, however you want to
Yeah.
put it through. But yeah, so well, initially it was Judaism. It was Judaism where it came from. Judaism was where Christianity and Islam both eventually derive most of their beliefs, most of their practices, of course, with their own variations, with their own additions into that. And yeah, like it starts from Abraham. And so who is Abraham now? Abraham, or yeah, I mean, Abraham. There are certain slight variations, but they all sound almost the same. So we can't put a definitive timeline as to when he really existed, because again, this goes before the time of Moses, like before ancient Egypt, before Mesopotamia, before Babylon. So we can't really we don't know for certain because of just how old it is, since, and also we don't have any archaeological evidences to suggest what time period here that we are talking about. But of course, we have scriptures, we have oral recitations, we have stories that have been passed generation to generation. So this is how it all starts. I mean, I'll refer to the story from the Bible, since I'm well versed with the Bible.
Yeah.
This comes from the Old Testament, from the book of Genesis, which is the first chapter of the Bible.
Mm.
Is also the first chapter in the Torah as well, since the Torah is the Old Testament in the Bible, or vice versa. So there were these tribes. They were called Canaanites. I mean, the general region of where modern day Israel, Palestine, where they fall along. That's what used to be called as the land of Canaan back then. And this is, well, historically speaking, this is the Fertile Crescent. If you have heard of the term, it stretches like in the Tigris and Euphrates River, like that delta region is what was called the Fertile Crescent. So Canaan, the land of Canaan, was somewhere in the east, of this area,
Yeah.
and that is where our character Abraham was from. So, well, Abraham was a very nice guy. He was a very noble person, and God was very pleased with him. So, he throughout the Bible, in his story of how it is written, there is another character that I will come to later. These two characters, that is Abraham and Moses, to be specific, they have
Hmm.
had a very personal relation with God, or at least like in terms of how story is told. No other character throughout the Bible, or even the Torah, has had that kind of close, almost like a friendly relation with God in terms of how they spoke, in terms of the insights or the commands that you used to get from there. It was not like a master slave relation. It was more like a best friend relation.
Okay.
So Abraham was, you can say, like this, from what is written, like a noble leader of a group of people that were called the Canaanites. And well, this is where we get to what the theology of what Judaism is built on, which is covenants with the people of God. And the first covenant in the Bible or the Torah, or the one that the Judaism is starts with, is the covenant that was made with Noah. Now, Noah is like a much older character. He comes before Abraham, the great floods. And the
Mm.
covenant that was made with Noah, which was the first covenant, is that God will now not uh, do another great flood, would not, the promise was, okay, like, Noah and your family, you will go along to repopulate the earth. I will not
Yeah.
put forward the another flood to do what I did. And a sign for that was the rainbow. The Interestingly enough, the rainbow is actually a sign of that covenant, which is God's promise, saying that I will not flood the earth again. That is where
Mm.
the rainbow appears from. So that is the first covenant. The second covenant, which we're coming to, is the covenant that was built with Abraham. Now, this covenant is really what kick-started the whole. It was not like, it ends with Moses. All the books, all the rules and regulations that Judaism is built on, it starts with the covenant that came with Abraham, and that was with the test that God had done with Abraham, where He called Abraham up a mountain with one of his sons. Now, you see, Abraham was very old when he had his son. In fact, he used to always keep praying for God for a son, and he was, if I'm not wrong, almost 70 or 80 years old when he had his child finally. So it was a
Oh,
big deal
wow.
for
That's a
him when
long
he had.
time.
Yeah, indeed, it was because he used to, but one can say that it was also like a test that God was doing to test his faith, to see whether he would, still stay
Mm.
faithful. And he did, and eventually he was given a child. But then the test did not end there. There was an ultimate test. That is what the covenant is built upon. It is when he his son. Now, here is where there is a slight, you can say, a conflict of ideas, because the Jews and the Christians believe that the son was Isaac. You see, he had two kids from two different wives. One was, I'm not well versed with the names of two of his. One was his maid, and one was his, well, wife, or you can say both were his wives. It's like really old. So the point of
Mm.
contention here is, the Muslims believe that Abraham's son Ishmael was the one with whom this covenant was done, whereas the Jews and the Christians believe that it was the other son, the son Isaac, from whom the covenant was done. Now, I'll come to what the covenant is. So Abraham was called up on a mountain with his, like, God told him, bring your son, come up there,
Yeah.
build an altar for me, and sacrifice your son. The son that
Okay.
you waited for like 80 years to have, and now I'm calling
Yeah.
you to sacrifice. So that was like a test, because, well, when he was about to do that, it says that, God came and said that, okay, no, stop. You have passed the test. And since you have showed me so much faith, this is my covenant with you, that all your whole lineage, starting from your son, every single of my prophets will come from his line. And this is where the point of contention comes, because you see, the Muslims say that Prophet Muhammad was the last in the line of Ishmael, whereas the Christians, we say that Jesus was the last of the line from Isaac. Now, if
Okay.
we want to talk a little about proofs, I mean, I don't know whether this might upset certain people or not upset certain people, but when
Mm,
you go through the New Testament of the Bible, we have an
mm,
entire lineage all the way from the time of Abraham, his son, his son, his son, his son, all the way till Joseph, and then Jesus. But well, you don't see similar scriptures on the Islamic side of what they say, being the, so one can, I mean, again, it's another debate,
okay.
it's another thing that we can't really point out to. But you see, this covenant is really
Yeah.
what Judaism starts with, like the idea of Judaism, these Semitic people coming together, being monotheistic, worshipping this one God. It starts from the
Mm,
covenant with Abraham, and that is where the also the practice of circumcision, that's also where it emerges. Like Abraham
mm,
instructed, once he came back down, and apparently Abraham
yeah.
instructed his followers to, circumcise themselves as a covenant on their end. It was not like a mandate, but it was a way of showing their or pledging their
So,
allegiance.
so when he told them to get circumcised, now is this the Jewish people, right, or is
It's,
this
it's the
Christians?
Jewish
Like,
people.
what's the difference? Okay.
Sorry.
And all of this is before Jesus came into
Oh, this
play,
is
right?
way long before Jesus. This is
Right.
before Moses. This is before Moses. And
Okay.
well, so that is really the foundation of, why it is called Abrahamic faith. And,
Yeah.
this is really what kick-started it, everything. Because, well, uh, Christianity and Islam, whether people like to listen to it or not, they both came from Judaism. Judaism is like the father religion. Both Christianity and Islam, of course, they all disagree with each other. They all
Mm-hmm.
have, like different practices, different beliefs, different practices, or different theologies. But
Yeah.
doesn't change facts. They both came from Judaism. Judaism was the origin. That, and this covenant, the second covenant, which was the first covenant that really laid the foundation for Judaism, is where it all started from. That started with
Yeah.
Abraham. Hence, the term Abrahamic faiths.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. So the big father was Judaism, and then from there was that split into Christianity and Islam,
Well,
right?
it's really difficult to call it a split because again, they both, Christianity and Islam, they both emerged at different times and in different means. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't really call it a split, but yes, again, the foundation as to the, like, for example, the story of creation. Both Christianity and Islam derive their stories of creation from the Torah, whether they like it or not. It is derived from the Torah. The
Okay.
whole idea of Adam and Eve, the garden, the apple, the great flood, those are all stories that are derived from Judaism.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Uh, so you did speak about Abraham, maybe a little bit about Noah, right? So the three covenants. I don't know if you spoke about Moses as of yet.
No, 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 no. Moses is
Mm-hmm.
another interesting character because, like I just mentioned, throughout the Bible, there are not, it's not even Jesus, but it's just Abraham and Moses. These are the two characters who have really had a very personal, close relation to God in terms of what is written about them and also what they used to, these both. So
Yeah.
the next moving on is Moses. Moses is also pretty interesting character. Like, I'll just give a quick, brief summary of his origin. So you see, Moses was born at a time where the this comes much after Abraham, and this actually
Yeah.
comes after Babylon had taken over the land of Israel. If I'm not wrong, there are certain historical evidences about it which suggest that it was King Nebuchadnezzar. This name also appears in the Old Testament of the Bible. So this time
Mm.
period of when now we don't know precisely when did this happen, but eventually it seems that the Egyptians also conquered the Canaanite lands, and yeah, and they enslaved the Hebrew population. They were all taken, relocated to Egypt, where they were, well, forced into slavery. and this is the time period that Moses was born on. Now, if you want to talk about the historical facts of this, exactly to pinpoint where this time period is, there's actually an interesting there's an interesting tablet that was discovered, I think, in the 60s or so, and this was the Mernafta stele. Now you see, this comes from the time period of, as the name suggests, Pharaoh Mernafta, which is somewhere which would put this tablet to be have written somewhere around 1200 BCE, and this is actually the
Okay.
only tablet where we see the term Israel written. This is the
Mm.
oldest recorded mention of the term Israel. So this suggests the
Okay.
fact that yes, there were Semitic people present in ancient Egypt, and these
Mm.
were labeled as Hebrews or the children of Israel, as it is written in these tablets. So if this is the case, we can kind of assume or make a wild, like a more like a calculated assumption that the time period when Moses was around was somewhere when during the Ramesses the second, which would put it, you can call like the peak of, somewhere at the, when Egypt was at its best.
Okay. Okay.
So Moses was, well, he was, at the time he was born, apparently the pharaohs and his courtesans, they have these their own priests, the ancient Egyptian
Hmm.
priests. They had a prophecy saying that there'll be a newborn Hebrew who will overthrow the king. And of course,
Hmm.
naturally, owing to this prophecy, the Pharaoh didn't really like this, so they ordered to kill every baby boy that was born, every Hebrew baby boy that was born, kill them. Due to which, when Moses was born, what his mother did is his mother put him in a basket and put the basket in the river Nile, and left it.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And eventually, what happened is this basket was found by the queen, the then queen of the Pharaoh's wife. She found this, and again, this is a point of contention, but there are certain assumptions made that she did not have a kid, or that she was having difficulty having a baby. And so when she found this basket with this baby in it, she thought she took this as a sign from the gods, and she took this kid in, and she raised this kid as her own. So you see, in the early life, Moses was basically not a good guy to the Hebrews. He was the people that used to rule over them. He was part of that family. And it was much
Mm.
later that he actually came to realize his Hebrew roots, where he came to know
Okay.
that, okay, I'm not an Egyptian, I'm a Hebrew.
Yeah.
And that is when he escaped from Egypt. He was out in isolation for some time. He was out with some tribes, which is where he had the first interaction with God. And it was through when he went up to a mountain, and he heard this voice from God saying that, I choose you. You will lead my people out of Egypt. And that's where this whole thing starts from. And then, of course, he comes back
W-
to Egypt. He
was that the burning bush, the mountain that you were talking about?
Yes, yes, it's the burning bush. Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. There
it
there
was the
are the
burning.
spiritual there are the spiritualists who might say that, oh yeah, the burning bush was I don't know what's the name of the plant. I think acacia. But there is that debate that's going on with whether if it was a psychedelic. I don't know, but
That is an
there
interesting
is that.
perspective. I mean, that is an interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because they say that to enter into a trance state or to be in connection with the divine, you need to let go of the egoic state, and the psychedelic helped him get into that state. Now, we've had not well, maybe offline. I've had discussions with many people regarding what is true, what is false there. And the hippies have a different take on it, but I just thought it would be interesting to put that point in. But yes, Going back to your point, though, how did he recognize or realize that he was part of the Hebrew community and not that he was Egyptian? Because he was being raised by the Egyptians, correct?
Well, there is actually an incident which is linked to this, which is written in the second chapter of the Bible, the book of Exodus. Now, as the name suggests, Exodus,
Yeah,
it is about Moses and how, there was the exodus of the Hebrew people out of Egypt. So in that, there's an incident where Wells, he was apparently whipping a guy once. Like he was whipping a Hebrew guy, and then one of them, which likely was his brother Aaron, I guess, his older brother, he ran up to him and he told him that you're hitting your own people. What's wrong with you? Like, why don't you see these?
mm,
These are your people. And due to which it seems as though, like, again, some might call it like divine intervention. There was like this spark that like, well, what am I doing? And while this was happening, another Egyptian, like, the supervisor or something at the site, went and
yeah,
started whipping this guy, dude. And this seems to have pissed off Moses a lot, and he actually went and killed this guy. And then the whole running out of Egypt thing comes after this. So
okay.
yeah, that is, he was told by his own people that this is your people. Why are you doing this to us? And yeah,
So after realizing that, then the mountain, the conversation with God, the burning bush, that takes place.
he runs out of Egypt. He goes out of Egypt. He runs away fearing persecution because he had just killed somebody. And he went away. He ran away, and he was, he met this. They are known as, they are referred to as the Gentiles in the Bible. Those people, like this group of people that are pagans that live, as small tribes or small clans outside. He went and integrated in one of their clans, and yeah, he was
Okay.
living with them as a normal herder, away from his, lavish princely lifestyle that
Mhm.
he was accustomed to. And this is where he had the interaction, with God through the burning bush out in the
Okay.
desert.
Now, would
Yeah.
one say that he was a pagan? That would be a controversial take, right?
That would be a controversial take indeed. Well, since he was born, I mean, not born, sorry, since he was raised by the Egyptians, well, it is safe to assume that, yeah, he probably likely was used to the pagan customs, and that's what he had known with, because there is no real, uh, characteristics or anything written about him which suggests that he led the people, whether it's, out of the land or just in prayers to God before the
Yeah.
incident of the burning bush. Like everything about Moses, most of it comes after that initial interaction, where through that interaction in the burning bush is where he also got the, the weapon, the staff that he uses much later. I mean, much later he uses that a lot. He uses that for a miracle in the court, because when he, and of course then eventually he used the same staff to split the sea, as we know
Mm.
about, which is the most popular take. I mean, a lot of people know about that story. But
Hmm.
yeah, so chronologically, I'll go about this chronologically. So then eventually, when he had this
Sure.
interaction, he came and he told this to his Gentile clan people. And he told, okay, like, God has told me I need to go back to Egypt. I need to get my people out. So when
Yeah.
he went back, and now it is his brother, like his stepbrother, that is his mom, the his stepmother, that is the queen, his her actual son is now the king. Because you see, it's been a few years now, he, since he ran away from Egypt, and he was there settled with this whole clan. And this interaction, this incident with the burning bush actually comes a few years later. It doesn't happen immediately after he runs out of Egypt. So now when he's
Okay.
back over there, it's his brother, it's his stepbrother who's the king. So he goes in, he introduces himself that I'm Moses. And once he recognizes this, Pharaoh, being the Pharaoh, comes and says that, I forgive you. Like, you had murdered a guy and you went away, but you know what? Since I'm the Pharaoh, it's all forgiven. There's no capital punishment, nothing. And to which Moses goes ahead and says that that's not why I'm here. I'm here because the God of the Hebrews has told you to release his people. you have to release them from slavery. And of course, initially they did not take this very seriously, and
mm,
due to which Moses, this is a very famous quote also that's there in the Bible. Behold the power of God, and the staff, he drops it and it transforms into a snake in the court in front of the Pharaoh. It transforms into a snake, and and also at the same time, Pharaoh is like really surprised, like, oh shit, this guy doing like black magic or something over here. So he asked
right.
his priests, you know what,
Mm,
go and do something about this. They
sure.
also conjure a snake. They also make a snake. But
Oh,
Moses' snake was able to beat the other snake. So you see,
okay.
the thing is, I mean, I'll go slightly off topic over here. Now, I have
Sure.
thought about this particular incident. I mean, of course, it's just a story that you can read, but this is where it gets interesting. Now, of course, Moses was able to do this, but even the the Egyptian priests were also able to do this. So now, what does this suggest? Does this suggest that their gods are also real, and that the Hebrew god is more powerful than their
Mm,
god because
yeah,
his snake was able to beat their snake?
right.
So, I mean, of course,
No.
that is again a point of contention. Some might just say that, oh no, they were, that was the devil's snake, and the devil is weaker
Mm,
than God. So, of course, so, well, there's a lot of takes into that. But again, that's an interesting perspective on that, which suggests that, well, at least in that time period, since they didn't clearly were not praying to the same God, and yet they both were
mm,
able to perform miracles. It's just that one was stronger than the other.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, really that is where
Mm,
the Hebrew people that were there, this is where they, when they see this sign, and that's when they know, okay, he's here, he's going to take us out, our God has not abandoned us.
mm.
And so, the support slowly starts building. And then of course, then comes the 10 plagues, which I'm pretty sure you might have an idea about.
I've never heard about it, actually. 10 plagues.
Really?
I know the 10 commandments, but not the 10 plagues, no.
uh, I mean, I'm really not. Is it 10? Is it the 10 plagues? I hope I'm not messing this up.
Hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh yeah, it is 10. Yes. Wow. Okay. I was I was almost gonna say it was like 8 or something, but yeah. So then comes the 10 plagues, where Moses went back to the Pharaoh, since the Pharaoh did not listen initially. When, I mean, they thought it's a joke when he told that the God of
Yeah.
the Hebrews is asking you to release, not asking, sorry, he's telling you, he commands you to
Mm,
release his people, leave his people. To which, of course, since the Pharaoh denied it, and that's when another warning was given. And the first of the plague was, well, Moses went to the river Nile. He hit his stick. You see, this stick is very important throughout all of this journey, up to the end. He put his stick
mm.
inside the river, and the water turns blood red.
Oh,
The
wow.
water turns blood red. That is the first plague.
Okay. Okay.
Of course, if your river is not water and it's blood, your fishes die. You cannot irrigate your farms.
Sure.
There's a food problem. There's so and so, and then the next plague that comes after this is a plague of frogs, where a lot of frogs just come into the town. They destroy harvests. They destroy food supplies, food stocks, granary stocks. They destroy
Mm,
all of them, and they go away. The one that comes after that is these locusts, or you can say fleas, locusts, that followed in
okay.
after this, and they did the same thing. This is what brought diseases.
Mm,
Because the very next plate, now you see this 1, 2, and 3. That's the third one. Now the fourth one is because, since a lot of insects, a lot of fleas, a lot of locusts that swarm towns, that swarm livestock. The fifth one is the pestilence of livestock. Livestock started dying. Cows started dying. The goats, the cows, everything, cattle, everything started dying because of
yeah.
sickness. That was the fourth plague. And the fifth one, of course, when you have a lot of livestock dying around you, in like ancient Egypt, where you don't have modern medicine, what's going to happen? There's going to be infection. There's going to be
Sure.
more diseases that will be transmitted,
Right.
and that's when it comes to humans. That's
Mm,
five, and the this one, yeah. The
Not the
sixth one,
bubonic plague, but kind of.
the sixth one is like, yeah, basically that it was like a early bubonic plague, you can say. Like there was
Okay.
boils, a lot of boils. People were sick. Like people were there, and then there was hail, and following the locust was also darkness. Like there was one big the that is actually like it was supposed to be, or at least it's written that this was supposed to be the last of the plagues. But since the pharaoh was still not willing to abide by by what God has commanded, and that is
Mm.
when we come to the last plague. And the last plague was the death of every first born kid in every household throughout Egypt. And to avoid, or to make sure that it's not the Hebrew kids that are dying, Moses was
Yeah.
commanded by God to smear the lamb blood on the houses of where Hebrew people used to stay. So those houses, and then of course going down into the story says that on that night, the angel of death himself, herself, came down and went through every house in Egypt, but did not enter those houses which had the lamb blood on it. And every other house that did not have the lamb blood, the firstborn kid, including Pharaoh's own son, they died that night. The entire, all across Egypt.
Wow.
After which, that this was the last plague. After which, the Pharaoh finally had enough. He told Moses, "Take your people and you can go."
So wait, which number was that? That was the 10th one?
That was the 10th one, yeah. So it's it's there's like the blood river, then there's frogs, then there's a lot of lice jumping in, there's flies, then there is the livestock death, then there is the
Yeah.
boils, the human boils, the hails, the locusts, then the complete
Mm.
darkness, and then after that comes the death of every firstborn.
And after that, he decided
That's when the
to.
Pharaoh decided, okay, that's it, because he lost his own son. The Pharaoh's own
Okay.
son had died from that. And so he was like, okay, you know what? Take your people and go.
Why did this? Why did these 10 things occur? Just to revisit for the audience, is it so that they did not respect God or something? Is that why, or what was the purpose behind the 10 occurrences?
Well,
You
that's
think?
one way to say it, that yes, they did not respect or agree to the terms, because Moses had gone there and told that, well, God
Yeah.
commands you to leave them. And the Pharaoh said, no, which God? What God? I'm not gonna listen to you. And so, well, chronologically, it was supposed to end with one plague. But
Mm.
throughout, when each plague was happening, the Pharaoh was still not agreeing. He was still
Hmm.
not agreeing to let them free until he lost his own son in the 10th one. Only after
Sure.
that did he agree to let them off.
Okay. And these, where are these written? Whatever you have just stated,
The
are
book of
they written in
Exodus,
a Exodus? Okay. And that comes from the
that comes
Hebrew
from the
tradition.
Bible, that comes from the Torah as well.
Oh,
It's the second chapter of the Bible.
okay. Wow. Wow. So then after that, did the 10 Commandments come into play, or he walking through the river and the water opening up and
Yeah,
and
yeah, and
instances
it's
like
not the
that?
river, it's the sea, it's the Red Sea that we're talking
See.
about.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, so after this, he told, okay, you guys can go, just go away. So,
Yeah.
well, the Hebrew people, they all, packed up their stuff. They started heading out. And yeah, so eventually, after, when they reached, and it seems that, well, Pharaoh clearly wanted to take revenge because he just lost his son. He just lost his oldest
Mm.
son. So, of course, he was not going to let them off that easy. He
Yeah.
wound up his army. They took their chariots and they actually chased them. They actually followed them through the desert until they reached the Red Sea. The Red Sea. Now the sea was here. All the people that were with Moses were like, well, this is it. We're going to die. The Pharaoh's
Yeah.
armies are coming behind us. They're racing with their chariots. We have the sea in front of us. That's it. We are done. What can we do? And that's when Moses, puts the staff down. The sea splits in front of them, and they start walking toward it. And then when they reach to the other side, and when the Pharaoh eventually comes to the same rank, I mean, even there, his soldiers are also shocked at what they are seeing, that the sea is split in front of them. So they also chase into the sea. But then, once all the Israelites are on the other side of the sea closes, like boom, and all of the Pharaoh's armies uh,
Hmm.
are submerged, they are killed. Interestingly, there is actually historical archaeological evidence for this. uh, near
Hmm.
the near the what would be at the trilateral border between Jordan, Saudi, and Egypt, in that area of the Red Sea, they have discovered like coral reefs that
Hmm.
seem to have grown on top of what looks like chariot wheels under the sea. So where did those wheels come from? Why are they in the middle of the sea? I mean, why would you have ancient Egyptian chariot wheels inside the sea?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
actually interesting. I mean, I also learned of that actually quite recently. Like, I mean, a few months back. I was like, wow, that's insane.
Hmm.
But then, of course, there'll always be those that would disagree or would come up with alternate theories. So, well, at the end of the day, it's about what you want to see and what you don't want to.
Sure. Sure.
And then, of course,
Yeah.
they're on the other
Mhm.
side. The Ten Commandment tablets come after that, where
Okay.
he's called up a mountain. Moses goes up, and that's where he receives the Ten Commandments directly from God. And these are the Ten Commandments are the ones that we also believe. It's the Jews and the Christians. They both believe in that as the set of what you can say, rules and regulations about how you should live as a person, with God, and how you should be just a nice person in general.
And none of this is touched upon, well, in a different way for sure, because all religions emphasize this, but the Ten Commandments and the story of Moses, was this signified in the Islamic faith or no?
Yes, it was. They have similar. I mean, they have same beliefs. I mean, the only difference here is, look, Jews and Christians, we both believe our books to have come from where they come from. They have different authors. They were written at different time periods. Like,
Yeah.
if you're talking about the Torah's foundation has the four books of Moses, which is Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Numbers and Deuteronomy, these two books were written while the Israel, like after they had crossed the Red Sea, because you have to remember that, well, it's a long trek, it's a long walk from Egypt to like where modern day Israel is. So
Hmm.
it's a long way to go with a lot of people. They're not going to reach there in a day. It's going to take at least a month or maybe years. Depending on how they go. Again, you're going along with a lot of people, a lot of families. So
Sure.
the book of Deuteronomy and Numbers were actually written while they were walking there, while they were on the way. And these books
Hmm.
talk about rules and regulations. But I mean, if you're talking about the Islamic belief, well, they they believe that, well, they got a revelation from God directly, and God knows everything. So this is what God has sent through an angel to the messenger, which who they call, I mean, their messenger being Prophet Muhammad. So they say that
Hmm.
he received the revelation directly from heaven. It was not a revelation that was written by people. So yeah, you can say yes. They have their stories. We have ours. It's like it's the same thing. It's like seeing two sides of the same coin, but you just have to
Sure.
choose which side you want to see.
Okay. Now let's go into uh, Jesus Christ. His story, how things came about from his end, and if you could shed some light on those crucial years that he disappeared. Now, of course, there are theories from the hippie community on that end as well. But if you could shed some light on when did that arc begin, and how far was it from Moses' arc that I would say reignited the Christian faith in a way, if that's the right way to put it?
Christianity comes after Jesus. There was no Christianity before Jesus. People, the idea of the being followers of the Christ, it comes from their Christian. Before that, well,
Yeah,
Jesus himself was a Jew. He was not a Christian. He was a Jew. He was born in a Jewish family and he was a Jew. Everyone around him was a Jew. In fact,
yeah,
even after his resurrection, when his disciples were preaching the gospels all across the former Roman Empire, the believers or their followers were not really viewed as Christians. They were just merely viewed as a new subsect of Judaism. Initially, that is how they were viewed. Early Christians were viewed like that. There was never a proper segregation. They were just believed to be like another sect, another branch or another sect of Judaism itself. The term Christianity, Christians, it appears much
mm,
later.
okay,
Yeah, so yeah, well, Jesus, the big guy, the main MVP of the Bible. I mean, the whole belief
yes,
system,
the
the
most
Christian belief
the
system
most famous
around
man
this.
on planet Earth.
Most famous, I mean, Donald Trump himself admitted that, if you remember that from his first term. So, yeah, speaking of Jesus, well, Jesus comes much, much later. And we know, and the thing is, when we talk about Jesus, we do have a lot of historical evidences because Jesus was born when Judea or the area of Jerusalem, Israel, was under Roman
Yeah,
occupation. And well, you know how the Romans were. They loved bookkeeping. Everything was inscribed. Everything was maintained records of. And that's why we have a lot of manuscripts about Jesus, not just from his followers, but even from the people that viewed him as a political threat. That was the Romans. There's a lot of evidence that suggests the fact that yes, there was a guy that was named Jesus, and eventually Rome, because of the fact that he was uniting a lot of people either through his teachings or through the miracles that he performed. Eventually,
mm,
Rome viewed him as a political threat to that region because if you start igniting the population and get them on your side, well, they're going to stop paying us taxes. They're going to stop paying us taxes, and then well, we don't want that. We don't want instability, and that's eventually why they crucified him to begin with. But then again, there's a lot of you see a lot of deep diving to do into that to get to why it is that he was eventually crucified. It was not just Rome that wanted it, but it was also the Jewish Pharisees back then. Um, because well, Jesus when he came, he confirmed previous prophecies that were written in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, to be the most prominent one. He fulfilled many of the prophecies that were written 5, 6, 800 years before him. But
okay,
all there but then when he came and when he was preaching this to the common folk, this challenged the authority that the then upper class Jewish Pharisees of that area had. It challenged their authority because now people would stop listening to them and people would
mm,
well start listening to Jesus more. And for
yeah,
them, in their eyes, they only viewed him as the son of a carpenter because
mm,
Joseph was a carpenter. They viewed him as that a carpenter's son is coming and challenging us. That's not
yeah,
how it works. So yeah, eventually there was a big plot to get him out of the way, and that's where they teamed up with Rome, and well, that's how the crucifixion eventually happened. It was not just Rome behind it; it was also the upper class Jewish Pharisees, as they were called.
okay. Wouldn't that be a controversial take in this day and age? Yeah.
Yeah, yes, of course. I mean, anything like this whole. I mean, if we start making a podcast about religion, that alone is pretty controversial. Like you
Yes.
can you can try to sugarcoat it, you can try to be mild as much as you want, but there will always be
Right.
something that will upset somebody because again, religion is quite
S-
a sensitive
certainly.
topic. People have different belief systems based on, it can be maybe their personal experiences, maybe it is just based on what they were accustomed to learning, what they were told in their childhood. I mean, I was also
Yeah.
like that. I was also like that. But then eventually, well, I started hopping from place to place, and I started being intrigued by other faiths, other stories, and
Sure.
understanding, okay, like
Yeah.
how does the story of the beginning, the origin of creation, how is their story different from mine?
Mm.
I started
Right.
learning stuff like that. And yeah, see, even right now when I talk about the Bible as well, I am trying to talk most about it from what we know from historical context. Of course,
Sure.
there is the mythological aspect of this as well. That's where faith and belief comes in. But
Hmm.
yeah, well, in my opinion, I mean, we are all here, we are all learning, we keep learning something new every day. The moment,
Indeed.
like, if you want to understand the bigger picture, you got to put all the pieces together. if
Yeah,
you if you look at just one piece and you're told that this piece is the whole picture, you will die knowing nothing.
for sure. For sure, 100%. And that's why we see a lot of division too. Rather than wanting to understand different perspectives or try to get to the true essence, I feel like we have many religious traditions, sure, but within the religious traditions, beyond the cultural implications or m- mythological stories, or one might say, oh, it's not a myth, it's real. Okay, based on real life stories too, stories nonetheless, are we able to extrapolate the core meaning or the actual lesson that we are supposed to learn? Because I feel like a lot of people get lost in the philosophical debate of what's right, what's wrong, what's morality, this, that, and that's good as an exercise. But people forget to distinguish that between this is philosophy, this is discussion, this is reality, and this is religion flowing through its values. So, for example, we can always talk about whether or not this was a myth or this was real, whatever the stories that you have mentioned. But if we fail to implement, wait a second, why were the Ten Commandments the way that they were? How
Exactly.
can I embody those truths? Instead of debating, oh, who crucified Jesus? What did Jesus actually have to say? Why was he crucified for it? Okay, that's because power, control, influence, there were these forces that he was against, and they did not want to open their hearts. They didn't want to get to the truth. They just wanted to cover up and keep playing their politics. That's why he was crucified. So I feel like these core essence or meaning is left out, and people are just worried about the technicalities or the definitions, or this perspective is right, that perspective is wrong, but they fail to understand the actual meaning behind it. And this is what we see these days with the political and the religious divide. But anyway, um, anything you'd like to shed on the initial stages of Jesus's life? Because we jumped straight into the crucifixion and the and the political side of things, which is great because that's what happened. But anything before he disappeared for, I believe, 18 years, that was. And what was your take on where he could have been for those 18 years? Yes, that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can start with the with when he was born. I mean, when he was being born, if you remember from what I told you about when Moses was born, Pharaoh had like this prophecy given to him saying that a newborn baby will kill you. The same prophecy was given to the then, you can say, well, in a political sense, this guy was just a puppet of Rome. This guy was called King Herod, who
Yeah.
used to rule over Judea. He was just a puppet for, I mean, he used to pay tax to Rome. So he had a prophecy saying that there'll be a baby born here, and he will be the king of the Jews. He will dethrone you and stuff like that. And so, out of fear, the same situation, every newborn baby boy was asked to be killed.
Oh.
Yeah, and then of course, so due to which, well, the story is that Mary, that's Mother Mary, as we call her, she was praying one day, and that's when the angel Gabriel appeared. Now, well, if you just to be on the same page, there are some prominent angelic names that appear in the Bible. There is Michael, then there is Gabriel. I'll just stick to these two for now. So Michael
Okay.
is the protector, the guy who the one who defeated Lucifer in the initial days when he was cast down.
Is
Yeah,
this they refer to him as the Archangel Michael? Is
archangel,
that
yes,
him?
archangel, exactly. And Gabriel also is an archangel. But you see, Gabriel has a different role to fulfill. Gabriel is the guy who delivers messages. In fact,
Yeah.
even the Muslims also believe that it was Angel Gabriel. They call him as Jibril. It was him who came down to the Prophet Muhammad and preached the words of God, which is what they call today the Quran. So it's the same. So you see, with terms of Jesus, it was Mary was praying one day, and that's where Gabriel came. Gabriel appeared in front of her and told her that, well, you will give birth to a divine baby, and you have to remember that Mary was a virgin. She was still a virgin when she
Sure.
gave birth. That's why she's called the Virgin Mary.
Hmm.
And Jesus's birth was miraculous in that sense. That is the reason why we also refer to him as the Son of God, since,
Sure.
well, he technically didn't really have a biological father.
Yeah.
So when that was the case, then eventually when it was time to give birth, because of King Herod and all these things, Joseph
Yeah.
and Mary, that is Joseph is Mary's. Oh, also about Joseph, I forgot that. Yes, well, when Joseph was told that Mary is pregnant, I mean, you would naturally assume, like, put yourself in his position. You just come home and your wife just tells you that I'm pregnant with God's son. So, like, what
Yeah.
would be the first thing that would click in your head? I mean, like,
That's yeah. Yeah. That
yeah. So,
yeah.
well, to prove a point, Gabriel also came to Joseph and told that, you know what, fine. If you since you don't believe that this is the son of God,
Mm.
until this baby is born, until you name the baby, you will not be able to speak. And he went mute after that.
Oh wow. Oh my God. Okay.
Joseph
I didn't
Joseph
know
went
this.
mute. He couldn't speak. In fact, even
Mm.
later when Jesus was born, when he had to name the baby, right, he could not even say the name. He had to write it down. He had to write down. I mean, of course, the Hebrew term is Yeshu or Yeshua, and
Yeah.
Jesus is a much later Latinized version of that name. Well, it jumped from Yeshua, Yeshu to Jesus, and Jesus is what became Jesus. Latin to English.
Okay.
But the Hebrew name was something close to Yeshua. In fact, my surname Joshua also comes from there. It's a
Yeah.
Latinized version of Yeshua. That's where my surname comes from. So yeah, something Yeshua, Yeshu was the name that was, and he had to write it down because he couldn't speak. And only after the baby was named was he able to speak
Okay.
as the angel, since he doubted.
Yeah.
so so when it came to his birth, well, since the King Herod and this thing was going on, they had to actually go away out of the city. They went to Bethlehem, which is the place where Jesus was born. They went to
Mm.
a cave over there in a manger, and in that cave was where Jesus was born. That's why if you ever during Christmas time, you might have seen these decorations maybe at malls and stuff. They keep like a small manger, like a small hut with baby Jesus over there, and there'll be like
Okay.
goats. There'll be like three kings coming to visit
Yes,
him.
I've seen that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the origin of that story. The reason why he was born in that cave is because, well, the king was out there, slaughtering babies. So, there is another point of view to view this from, is to, you see, both of these times, Moses and Jesus, both were like maybe thousands of years. I mean, at least 2,000 years apart. It was nowhere close. At least 2,000 years apart, and yet it was the same turn of events in a way. There was this big king who got a prophecy that someone is going to challenge him, someone is going to challenge his authority, and so now he was out there, killing babies. But eventually, he couldn't stop what was going to happen. So some people might assume that, okay, this was the devil working, the devil doing his deeds, trying to
Yeah.
stop what is going to happen. And there are, I mean, I know I'm slightly jumping from topic, but there is also a modern way of putting this into perspective, when you talk about people who fight for abortion rights, as
Uh-huh.
to, you know, who is, you get what I'm saying, like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
another way of saying it, but yeah. So that was Jesus's origin story, and of course, the first 12 years of his life are pretty insignificant. Like, he
Yeah.
learns carpentry from his father Joseph, and and also there's an interesting incident, which is when he was 12 years old. He was in the second temple of Solomon, which is, well, if you know about the temple of Solomon, the first temple that was built at the time of Abraham,
Mm.
that was eventually destroyed when Babylon, that is Mesopotamia, when they invaded Judea, King Nebuchadnezzar, they destroyed the temple. That was the first time the temple was destroyed. Then the second time was built up after they came from Egypt. When they came back from Egypt and when they were well established in Israel, that's when the second temple was built. And the second temple was later, after Jesus' resurrection, the second temple was destroyed by Rome, because of the upheaval that came after Jesus's death/resurrection. So
Yeah.
there is a prophecy linked to the third temple being rebuilt, and technically that's happening, but again, that's another conversation. So
Mm.
in this temple, when Jesus was 12 years old, he was having like you can say, a debate with the priests, and these were like, old aged, well experienced priests, and even they were surprised at this baby's intellect. 12-year-old is having a religious debate with like 60-year olds over here.
Sure. Mm.
So a lot of things about Jesus's life after that start becoming a gray zone, because straight from 12 years we jump to 30 years, which is
Sure.
when he's said to have been coming back to the city, people greeting him like, like he had
Mm.
gone to some far away. And there's a lot of conspiracy also in regards of this. There's a lot of theories that say that he had gone eastward, where he learned a lot of, because you see a lot of teachings
Yeah.
that he comes up with later. That is when he comes, when he's 30, when he's back, a lot of the teachings, keeping aside the personal identity of God and stuff like that, in just in terms
Sure.
of how is it that people should live, whether it is, love your neighbor, and if somebody hits you, show the other cheek, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
These are very aligned with early Eastern philosophies, whether it is Hinduism, whether it is later Buddhism, Taoism.
Yeah.
They all
Right.
align, they have the same belief system. So there's a lot of, speculation, which also, well, theoretically it also makes sense that Jesus was somewhere in the east. He was,
Mm.
learning or enlightening himself, because a lot of his teachings align with Eastern belief systems.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is where the hippie take, or something that I wouldn't want to say that it is the truth, because I can't provide evidence for it, right? But if you actually meditate on it or pay close attention, if one is able to read the non-dual scriptures from the Eastern traditions, or if one is able to read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, or if one is able to read the um, not necessarily the Gita, but more so the Upanishadic scriptures that they have. And if you look at chakras and all of that, I know the conservatives might call these demonic or distraction. But if you, again, notice what these teachings are trying to say, it doesn't contradict Jesus's teachings. It is in full synchronicity. I would go to an extent and say that if you are following Jesus' teachings, you don't need to understand the non-dual scriptures or the chakras or the techniques, because the end goal of doing those things anyway is to be in alignment with Christ's consciousness, which is to purify your mind and to surrender and to be at peace and to be one with Jesus, right? So, so that is that state of vibration or that purity that you want to get to, the kingdom of heaven that was within you that you recognize through these practices. But that's where I would say, or one would say, that when Christ went to the east, it's not that he never had these understanding or awareness, but that he must have built these techniques which helped him ground the awareness that he had already possessed. And when he came back to the West, maybe these things were secretive and were not to be communicated to the masses, but was more like, hey, this is too complicated, the chakras or the non-duality and stuff. Let me just make it simpler for them and keep it this way. And that's where in the Hindu tradition we might call it bhakti. There's the sense of devotion where you let go of your ego and you're surrendering to a higher power. And in this case, rather than saying God, why don't you go for the Son of God? And one might also say that Jesus is God, right? So, but that doesn't contradict what I'm saying. If you're following the Son of God, or if you're following directly Jesus, who is God, either way, does it bring you peace of mind? Does it bring you love? Does it bring you vitality and strength when you think of him, when you take his name, not in vain, but with genuine compassion or genuine effort of wanting to get closer to him? I'm going off tangent here, but I was pretty stoked when that point came about with his going away for 18 years. Could be with the yogis, could be with the monks, right?
Yeah, I mean, because like just like you mentioned, a lot of his the main cores of his teachings. Now, of course, the conflicts comes like you just mentioned about where he's from, or who he led, and what were the people that were against him, or the people that saw him as a threat. But at the end of the day, what he used to teach, the if you live by that principle, just by his teachings, then I don't see any difference from what is written in the Upanishads to what is believed to be the karmic balance of life, whether it is in Hinduism or Buddhism. You don't see any difference over there. It's pretty much the same thing. So it is safe to assume that, yeah, well, where was he for 12 years? I mean, for 18 years, where was he? He was probably
Yeah,
out there, learning and stuff, or, eventually, well, when he came back, of course, like you said, there is a way to uh, convey that or propagate that message to people. People might not get it if you just give it raw to them. You have to put it in a
hmm,
different point of view, and that's exactly what he did. And
for sure,
yeah,
for
that
sure.
was his.
Also, what I notice is that in the dharmic traditions, you have I feel like they do a phenomenal job with the intellectual aspect and the heart aspect. Whereas when you look at the Abrahamic traditions, yes, there is the intellectual component, but it's more so straight to the heart. So, for example, in Jesus' case, rather than trying to intellectualize a lot of things, he just says, surrender to me. That sort of a dialogue. I'm not saying that's only what he said. I'm sure he has said plenty of valuable things that I
That's
am
how
too
you get
ignorant
people to
to.
follow.
Yes. So rather than complicating it or over rationalizing it, spoke straight to the heart. But this is where, for an atheist or for someone who is trying to understand the psyche and is not willing to surrender, they want to break it down. But that's also where, if you break it down through chakra system or through the ego stages of development or through other behavioral patterns that one might have, it's great. But ultimately, it will eventually lead you to surrender at some point in anybody's quest for truth, for that matter. Now, it could be through devotion, or it could be through just, hey, I'm agnostic, I give up. But get to that point, and once you get to that point, I believe surrender becomes easier. But that's where, if you have someone who is actually surrendered to the divine, talking to an atheist, they might have the wrong understanding of where the person's coming from. And this is where we have misunderstanding between a true religious person versus someone who is an atheist trying to seek for the truth, versus a fake religious person who is not really surrendered, who is not really given up his ego, is strongly associating himself with the ego and using the spiritual religious scriptures as an excuse to sort of solidify why he is right, as compared to why he could be wrong, or where he's being egotistical, and how he can inspire hope rather than forcefully imply religion or Jesus' teachings onto the disbelievers, right? I'm sure Christ talked about how to uh, behave or be with the disbelievers. I'm sure he talked about showing them love as well. I'm sure he emphasized on mercy and um, being open to having dialogues and that sort of a thing. Again, I am not that experienced, but that's what my intuition screams. And he
Yeah,
also
that's exactly what he said.
he didn't shun down on the ones who disbelieved him. In fact, he forgave them too. And he associated himself with the ones who were deemed as an outcast in the society as well, right? Um, but that all of that is something.
About that, there's actually an interesting verse about exactly what it is that you told about outcasts, and we're talking about. So there was this preach that that Jesus has given, and if I'm not wrong, this comes from the book of Matthew, which is one of the Gospels in the New Testament, where
Hmm,
well, someone questions as to because this is again, it's just three words: love your enemies. That's something that Jesus said. So when he was asked, like, why would you say something like this? And then to which Jesus has this thing in all of the gospels. He likes talking in parables, kind of like a riddle, kind of like explaining things through examples. That's what he used to do. So he gave a very beautiful examples that actually aligns with exactly what you just said right now. If a shepherd is out with his sheep, grazing on the hillside, he has 100 sheep, and one of them gets lost. 99 are with him. Will he be with the 99, or would he leave the 99 to go find that one lost sheep? What would a good shepherd do in that sense? That's exactly what Jesus said. In this instance, of course, Jesus being the shepherd, the 99 being his followers, and that one being the outcast. So of course, the teaching, I mean, it's very beautiful. It's uh, it's it's nice words when you put it like that, but it is unfortunate to see, of course, these days how people would like to interpret it in their own sense and in a different way. But yeah, Jesus does not tell you to reject people that don't align or don't believe with you. He asks you to be nice to them, be nice to everybody. I think your microphone is, I cannot hear you.
maybe the battery died, or is it
Yeah,
working
I
now?
can I
Okay,
can I
cool.
can hear you now.
So, so I asked what everything that I stated. Depending on that, would I be considered blasphemous for that by the conservative?
Again, it's yes, yes, yes. I can say something. Oh no.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be switching to the the microphone that I have through my laptop. Am I
Yeah.
audible now?
Yes. You are
Okay,
audible.
cool.
So
The
yes,
technique.
you would be called blasphemous again, depending on which denomination, which kind of Christian that you're dealing with. Because well, there's a thing with
Mm,
people that are conservative. One might say that, oh, they're very religious, but well, honestly, I would disagree with that. Just based on how people around are like. Well, just let's take an example. We believe that Jesus is going to come back again. So tomorrow, if he does come, like what would a conservative, an American conservative, would you think they would believe him if he actually comes in front of them?
yeah, fair point. No, they won't.
Exactly.
They
So,
won't.
because people that are the issue with people that are conservative is they take scripture and they put their own interpretations as to what it means,
Yeah,
keeping aside what is actually written. They would take it on face value and be like, okay, this is written, but this was written back then, so today the message will be different, and this is what we should be do. But then certain things are pretty straightforward, like when Jesus tells you to love your enemies. I don't think it had anything to do with which time period it was told in. It is pretty
right.
straightforward what it means. So
Yes.
yeah, that's the problem with modern conservatives. But so it's like at the end of the day, you wanna learn something, you wanna be close to scripture. Well, just read the scripture. Don't listen to what other people have to say about it.
And speaking of scripture, could you touch upon the difference between the Old and the New Testament, and also what happened after the departure of Jesus and the Bible not being completed for a long period and things as such?
Yeah, you see, the Bible itself is not one book. The Bible is a compilation of multiple books. Now again, this is a point that other people of different faiths like bringing up about the Bible, saying that, oh, the Bible has been manipulated, it has been corrupted, it has multiple different versions. And yeah, they are actually true. It has multiple versions because the Bible is, again, it's a compilation of multiple books that were written at multiple different times by different people in different languages. I mean, there was never a Bible that was written in one singular language. Like, for example, the Old Testament, the Torah, was written in Hebrew. That is where our Old
Mm,
Testament comes from. The Old Testament is the Torah. It is the same books that are there in the Torah. You see, the New Testament is what comes after the time of Jesus. And the reason why it is called the New Testament is because this is where we come to the last and final covenant. That covenant being the blood of Christ. And that is what we celebrate as the Last Supper, or every time you might have heard this when you go to church, it's the bread and wine that you have. The bread
yeah.
signifies the body of Christ, and the wine that you drink signifies the blood of Christ. And the idea here is, well, the Jesus sacrificed his blood, he shed his blood to take away our sins. And so
Mm,
here being that, well, if you wanna go to the silver city, you want to go to heaven, all you need to do is believe in Christ, believe in him, believe in what he stood for, follow in his teachings, and through him you go to heaven. So that is the last and final covenant that is there. So that covenant is where what the New Testament is built on. Now this is what differs the Bible from the Torah. So you see, the Bible, the New Testament especially, even the New Testament was written in three different languages. You have Aramaic, authors that wrote it in Aramaic. You have Greek, that were Orthodox authors. They wrote it, compiled their books in Greek, which, if I'm not wrong, includes the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and
mm,
no, Paul is later. Was Latin. And then you have Latin is Matthew, John, and Paul is pretty significant because, well, Paul comes much later, and the complete Bible was actually completely written somewhere, like, give or take, 70 to 100 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. So yeah, there's, if you get into a religious debate with someone from a different faith, they would usually bring up that point to discredit the authenticity of the Bible, calling it that, how can it be the words of God if it is written by men? And to them, well, I have only one thing to say. If you see, the entirety of the Bible was compiled over a period of around 1,800 years, from the book of Genesis to the book of Revelations. But
mm,
every single chapter to every single book in the Bible that were written by different people, some were fishermen. Like, for example, Andrew, Simon, and John, they were fishermen. Matthew was a tax collector. Paul was a priest. And John the Baptist, well, the Romans used to call him crazy, like, he was mentally unstable and stuff like that. These are the people that compiled this entirety of this book. Different people, different professionals, different lives, different time periods, and yet you find cross references from every book to the Bible to every other book of the Bible. So how can a bunch of disorganized people from different time periods, different languages, different
Mm.
professions, how is it that they could have known what the other guy spoke about?
That's fascinating. So you're
That is,
saying the similarities between the New and the Old Testament, right?
the Old Testament prophesizes a lot of things that are fulfilled in the New Testament. And the New Testament itself, especially the book of Revelations, have a lot of to come prophecies, some of which are happening around us, some of us are to happen. But again, those also can be called as interpretations of our own. As an example, when the United States dropped Hiroshima and Nagasaki, people believed that that's it, Jesus is coming back, this is the end of the world.
Mm.
And well, it's been almost 80 years since then. We are still, okay so far. And
Sure.
people are saying the same thing today, with the instability, with the stuff with Ukraine, with Europe being unstable right now, with USA trying to isolate itself, with what's happening in Iran right now, Israel being this big bad bully in the Middle East.
Yeah.
People are,
Right.
assuming that, yeah, it's happening again. So again, I would just say that those are just interpretations. Those are just what you think. At the end of the day, just be a nice person, just keep living your life. When the time comes, it comes. There's nothing that you can do about it.
Mm. Indeed. Indeed. Karmically, and from the dharmic tradition too, I have a different perspective, but that, of course, is for another video or a podcast. I do find the I do find the Judgment Day thing interesting because it's also present in all traditions and religions, right? Um, but could you touch upon the Ethiopian Bible, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the King James Version? Those
Yeah, I'm
those
glad
three.
you bring that up. So you see, the Ethiopian Bible is considered to be one of the earliest compilation of the Bible, and you see, the Ethiopian Bible, unlike the later versions that came, actually consists of more number of books. It is in total, the King James version, for example, has a total of 66 different books, from the book of Genesis to the book of Revelation. I mean, each book is designated as a chapter in the Bible. Like, you have the Gospels, then you have the book of the Corinthians, Lamentations, all the way till Revelation. So it is 66 in total. However, the Ethiopian Bible has six more books. It has 72 books in it. And this was, well, the Ethiopian Bible was actually the one of the first compilations that was put together in less than 100 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. And as the name suggests, it was, well, done in Ethiopia. And Ethiopia also has a pretty interesting later Christian history. In fact, if you have ever heard of the Ark of the Covenant, that, there was a lot of conspiracy about that. Some suggested that the Nazis had actually found it. So you see, the Ark of the
Mm.
Covenant is Moses when he received the Ten Commandment tablets. This is said to be like a gold box inside which the tablets were kept in. Okay. And later on, the thing is, eventually it just seemed to have disappeared. Nobody knows where it went. Nobody knows where it was. I mean, this box was considered to have a lot of divine powers, considering that these Ten Commandment tablets came directly from God. These were not written by Moses, these were given to him. And this box
Mm.
was considered to have some divine miraculous power. There was some conspiracy around World War II suggesting that the Nazis had found it, but again, that is very debatable. However, there is a church in Ethiopia. It's a very small, it's not even a big church. It's actually a very small church somewhere in the rural side, that says they claim that they have the covenant, the Ark of the Covenant with them, and they say that nobody is allowed to see it. There's only one priest, and the thing is that priest has to take a pledge, and he himself blindfolds himself when he goes inside, when he's near the box. Of course, there is
Okay.
no photo, there's no actual evidence. Some people say that they're just making it up, but again, Ethiopia has a lot of history when it comes to early Christians, scholars. In fact, one of the first disciples of Jesus that went headed toward Ethiopia was a disciple named Philip. He was the guy who went there. And so, yeah, they have their own, you can say, since Ethiopia itself, they were also more aligned with Eastern Orthodox belief systems. So they incorporated that, and that is where the extra books, most of the, I mean, the six extra books that are there in the Ethiopian Bible, they do not
mm,
contest any of the origin stories or any of the historical stories. The only extra additions they have is philosophies, philosophical implications about, what you should live, how you should live by, and what your consciousness, how important your consciousness is, and that,
yeah.
how your body is like, it should be treated like a temple. These are the things that are
Wow.
not taught in the King James version of the Bible, which is the latest version of the Bible. But then, yeah, now, yes, you like to say something?
Yeah. I don't know if I heard it wrong or you didn't mention it yet. I don't think you mentioned the Dead Sea Scrolls, but my question was, what is the world studying right now? What are people reading right now? The King James version?
The King James version is the most popular Bible that has been circulated around, because, I mean, look, uh, yeah, I mean, I'll come to that chronologically.
Sure.
Let me tell you a little about the Dead Sea Scroll first. So you see, the Dead Sea Scroll is a compilation of Old Testament verses. These are not New Testament stuff. These are Old Testament stuff that's written in the
Yeah.
Torah. And as the name suggests, these were like a bunch of, pots, jars that were found buried in the Dead Sea, that
Mm,
people apparently encountered somewhere in the 20s or 30s. And yeah, well, they opened these and they saw that these were Aramaic scripts that were, well, the Torah, basically some of the scriptures that was written over there. Now you see, this scripture was written 800 years before, it was carbon dated to be around 800 years before
mm,
the birth of Jesus. And yeah, well, when we since this was discovered in the 20s, the King James version, the final version of it, was done somewhere in the late 19th century. So what we have written in the King James version, then of course you have the Ethiopian Bible, and then you have this, that some apparently appeared out of nowhere, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And yet these three Bibles that were written through different time periods by different, that were propagated through different means, that were compiled in different languages, different grammars, and yet when the Dead Sea Scrolls were unearthed, it was found that, well, when you translate it, it doesn't contradict what is written here. This is the
okay.
same thing that is written there. So, the some argument might be made that since, the King James version had a lot of updates, one might say that the scripture got lost or corrupted. And yes, grammatically speaking, of course, you cannot match it word to word. It's obviously it's going to be different. You phrase words differently in different languages, but the overall message stays the same. There's no addition, and there's nothing that has been removed in terms of chronological evidences that are suggested. Now, you see, the Ethiopian Bible evolved over there in Ethiopia. The King James Version is what happened when Rome, it started with when Rome eventually recognized and they established Christianity as a state religion. That happened two generations after the death and resurrection of Jesus. So, um, yeah, like, initially the first Bibles that came out were Latin, since, Latin was the administrative language of ancient Rome. From Greek it came to Latin, from Latin then eventually when, Rome collapsed, and, Rome was also divided in west and east, and that is where we get the first major split in Christianity. You have Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and then you have Catholicism is what prominently stuck in the west, which is what is still today the most popular denomination of Christianity. And then of course from Latin it became to the Spanish Bible. The Spanish became the early Victorian English Bible, with the words such as they hath, thou shalt, thou
Yeah.
willst, stuff like that comes from early Victorian era English, and from there comes the King James version. So you see, this is how chronologically from Latin you have the King James. So you have the King James that evolved through Rome, and then you have the Ethiopian Bible that evolved away from all of this, and then you have the Dead Sea Scrolls that nobody knows who wrote them, nobody knows why were they there, but it's, one would suggest that they were, well, kept over there, sealed in those jars, maybe to escape persecution, who knows. We don't know for sure who wrote them, but we know what those scriptures mean. And, well, the idea that scriptures were corrupted does not hold
Mm,
much a strong argument, considering that the Dead Sea Scrolls do not contradict what is written in the most modern version of the Bible, that is the King James version.
mm. Okay. And have you had the opportunity to look into the three, and do you see any similarities, you think?
Uh, I mean, I have just searched about the Dead Sea Scrolls a little bit online. However, I do have a friend over here in Berlin. He's from uh, Co. There's a East African country. It's a very small country. He's from there.
Ivory Coast? Ivory
No, no, no.
Coast?
Ivory Coast comes slightly south. This is like in the. It starts with the sea. Gabon. I think it's Gabon.
Okay.
So it's like in
Um,
East Saharan Africa. So he is like through him I actually asked a little about the Ethiopian Bible, since the Ethiopian Bible is even today considered to be the oldest full compilation of the Bible that still exists.
hmm,
So I was mostly asking him into what the differences are, and this is what he told me, because like you have all the same authors that are there in the King James version, but they have certain Ethiopian authors, which is where the difference comes from, where these authors talk about spirits guiding them in their head, telling them to, this is how you teach people, and this is how it's mostly spiritual, the stuff
yeah.
that differs, because you don't find a lot of spiritual stuff written about how you treat your soul, how your soul should be clean, but stuff about the difference between your outer person and your inner person, how
Hmm.
your soul is, your body is like a temple, and the temple for the soul within, the soul being an essence of God. These things are things that come from the Ethiopian Bible, not from the King James version.
Wow. Seems like the hippies would like the Ethiopian Bible.
Yeah,
And I
man.
say hippies because I want to play the game both sides, right? I don't want to just say, oh yeah, conservatives, oh yeah, hippies. No, I feel like we all are in this together, and
We
and
all are in
it's
this. It's
nice.
like,
It's nice to throw in some terms, but although I will say, yeah, okay, spiritually, or for those who are looking to connect the esoteric aspects of religion, um, seems like the Ethiopian Bible could be a go-to for those individuals, right?
well, honestly speaking, you can do it with any of them. You read the King James, it's all about your mindset. You want to seek,
Okay,
you get what you seek.
sure, sure. Hmm. But it seems to be the case that the dialogue or discussions around soul and spirit is more evident in the Ethiopian
Yeah,
Bible.
those are
Not
what
that not that it's not
the
mentioned in
six
the other.
extra books are mostly covering, because they do not add anything when it comes to historical documents. For example, the life of Jesus, or the life of the disciples after him, or the life of the people before him in the Old Testament, whether it's about Moses, Abraham, Noah. There is no extra additions in terms of their lives, or any extra import characters, one might say, except
Yeah.
philosophies or teachings that are there in the Ethiopian Bible. That is the extra Oriental part of early Ethiopian culture, which is also reflected in their Bible.
Now, what about the denominations aspect? We have the famous Catholicism, right? That's a well-known denomination, and then you have King Martin Luther, who began the Protestant Revolution or Reformation, I should say. And then you have those who say, "Oh, I'm non-denominational," and then recently I found out that there are 300 denominations in Christianity.
Yeah, there are a lot of denominations. I mean, most of the denominations that you're referring to are actually new, very newer ones that are made by small communities of people. For example, since you're in the United States, Mormonism is one example of one such denomination. But
Yeah,
again, if it's like, see, at the end of the day, every branch eventually comes from one tree. There's one tree, then that tree splits to a few branches, then those branches, even more branches. That's how it goes. So if we're talking about the trunk of the tree, that is Catholicism. Catholicism is what came into force, or the first denomination, the oldest one, is what happened when Rome eventually adopted Christianity. That happened 2 generations after the lifetime of Jesus, when they
Mm.
once they incorporated, recognized Christianity as a state religion. And also, well, interesting fact that Rome, they tried to subjugate Jesus because they saw him as a political threat, but eventually Rome was the reason, and Rome even today is the reason why Christianity is the most popular religion in the world right now, because they were the ones that propagated it all over Europe, and from Europe, well, it went to the rest of the world. It was Rome. So eventually, they tried to subjugate it, but eventually they became the reason why it grew so much in the first place. So that is where Catholicism comes from. Catholicism is the first one. The first split that comes in Christianity comes between Catholicism and Eastern Orthodox. That split, well, of course, it's not, the split did not come theologically, because look, God does not preach messages saying that, okay, I'll tell you one thing, I'll tell you something else. The message stays the same. It is people that bring in divisions among
Mm.
themselves. And this early division actually comes when, you might know about this, when Rome split into Western Roman Empire, Eastern Roman Empire. You had
Mm.
Rome and you had Constantinople.
Mm.
Constantinople, they, since they rejected, the Pope, they rejected the Vatican City, they
Yeah.
made their own, and that was the first split. That's what Eastern Orthodox is, which you have today also. A prominent amount of Eastern Europeans still follow Eastern Orthodox. Now, of course, there are certain differences in their, but overall, look, their belief is the same. The Bible is the same. There are no two different Bibles. It is the same thing that they read. The only differences come in their practices. So Orthodox people prostrate and pray, which is very common to how Muslims pray. That's how Orthodox, they have a prayer mat, and that's how they pray. Catholics, of
Oh,
course,
wow.
bench. Yeah, that's how Orthodox people even today. That's how they,
Mm.
and Orthodox, they also like reading hymns in Aramaic. Like the hymns, the praises that they sing in the church, they do it in Aramaic. They don't do it in Latin or English. Even today,
Okay.
they do it in Aramaic. And then there are certain other, just what do you say, practices differences in, that's, if you're a priest, if you're a Catholic priest, then you're supposed to be celibate, like you cannot get married and stuff like that. However, if you're an Orthodox priest, that is not really a mandate. Like you can
Yeah.
marry, and you don't have to be celibate. So of course, and then yes, Orthodox people also encourage the idea of growing a beard. So there are certain aspects about Eastern Orthodox that actually make them similar to Muslim practices. And of
Okay.
course, it's the other way around for, Catholics. They're like, oh, be clean, and look, nice and look decent and stuff like that. Like, it would be considered like, like, what do you say? Like, okay, this guy is not being disciplined if, you go to church with a big beard. But on the other hand, the Orthodox would find that as very, disciplined and religious, that this guy is very religious. So that is where the first split comes from. Then the third most prominent one is Pentecostal or Protestantism, which comes in the 15th century through Martin Luther. And you see, I mean, look, Orthodox and Catholicism, one can say that that split came politically also. Since, Western Roman Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, the East rejects the West fights the East. Like, both just wanted to make a point about who's better. So one
Yeah.
might say that's how the split came. One can also say the same thing about Protestantism, because you see, at the time when Martin Luther was, this was, by the way, a time where the printing press was just, something that had rolled out new, which is also the reason why his movement got a lot of momentum. It was because
Mm.
of the printing press, because of the idea that he was able to propagate the message, saying that, well, the main split over here was between the lower class people, the workers, and the elites. Because at this time, medieval Europe, it was really the church that was, running everything. Kingdoms used to pay a tributary to the churches. The churches were basically governments, like banks. That's how they used to work. And as with modern governments also, back then also, it was the rich people that were calling the shots. And it
Mm.
was always the working class, they were the ones that were getting sidelined. When Martin Luther started, uh, propagating his message, saying that, why is it that we should listen to what these people say? Why do we have to give them money? Why does God need money? Like, why do we need to pay them to, like,
Yeah.
worship? Because he was
Right.
protesting the idea that, if you Like, because the idea that was going back then, again, this is from human corruption, you can say. The
Hmm.
early church fathers back then, they used to say, okay, like, the more you pay, the more I will pray for you. The more you will be blessed. If you pay me, if you, like, give me your daughter or your wife, I will,
Right.
ask to give you like 10 more daughters, or, stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
that was the idea that Martin Luther was fighting against, saying that, why these people are just running a business. They're
Hmm.
just shooting us. They're not actually nice people. And that is where the movement came, and that the followers of uh, his movement eventually, which also includes me, we are called Protestant Christians. And of course, the name says, Protestants, we protest the authority of the rich people. So that
Yes.
also one can say is political. And again, there are
Sure.
certain key differences over here also. For example, if you go to a Catholic household, Catholic church, you will see a lot of depictions of Jesus. And
Mm.
for some reason, I don't know, they depict Jesus as a blonde white guy, even though, well, he was clearly an Arab guy. He's not a white guy. He's not a European. But
Mm.
still, that again stems from, well, the supremacist idea that Martin Luther was fighting against. And hence,
Yeah.
the difference here is, if you ever go to a Protestant church, you will not see a single photo of Jesus anywhere. You will not see a single photo of Mother Mary. You will not see a single
Oh,
photo of Jesus. You will
what
just
about
see
the
a
cross?
you will just see an empty cross. You will not see a cross with the, with the idol or portrayal of
Mm.
Jesus on it. You will just see the cross. That is the only thing that you'll see. So, we don't, Protestants do not show images. We don't have images. Even if you go to, like, Protestant in general, we don't wear those,
Hmm.
necklaces with the cross on it.
Right.
That's what a
Right.
Catholic would do. So,
Okay.
yeah, those are all some of the light differences. And mainly, these are the three large denominations where Catholicism still is the biggest one and the oldest one.
Okay.
And every other denomination that you're referring to, whether it is Mathomas, Pentecostals, Mormons, these are all, well, small factions of a small group of people that started coming up with their own interpretations. And they don't really, what do you say, have much of a, what do you say, like a concrete foundation on what their theology is built on that makes it any different. But the three main differences are, as I said, it's Catholicism, Orthodox, and Protestants. These are the three big ones. And of course, Protestants and Orthodox both are much smaller compared to Catholicism. Catholicism is still really big. It makes up, like, what, at least 70% of all Christians are Catholics still.
Oh,
So it is a
wow.
pretty big denomination. Yeah. So,
Okay. Well, although I would think that a lot of them are, they label themselves as Catholics, but they don't really follow the traditional values or the systems, right?
yeah, no, I mean, well, if you want to talk about modern times, I mean, well,
Yeah.
is like, any faith, like, you can pick any religion, any faith. How many people truly follow their religion to the book? Everyone just comes up here and, start arguing about, no, my God is real, your book is false, they're false. But okay, you ask the person, okay, fine, how much do you follow of your book? If you want to sit here and argue with me about my book, how much of your book do you follow
Yeah.
to the world? So
Right.
yeah, this modern society is in general decadent, one might say.
Yeah. Well, cool, brother. I think we have covered a lot
Well,
in this
we have
podcast.
covered a lot, but we have covered nothing. That's just the
That is
thing is,
true. There is a lot more, and I believe we were yet to touch up on the archaeological evidence and um, other things that we
yeah,
missed out a
there's
little
honestly,
bit.
there is a lot that can be spoken about. And even if we drag this for like 3 hours, I don't think it would be adequate, because it's not just history, but it's history, it is teachings, it is a lot of different things, whether it's archaeological
But
evidences, manuscripts.
for sure, but it does create a lot more room for other episodes that we can record in the near
I know.
future. So people can stay tuned for that. Maybe next time we could go back to geopolitics for a little bit. There's a lot that's been going on in Mexico right now, and stuff in Iran and Israel. There's always something going on geopolitically
There's
speaking.
always something going on.
So, well, we'll catch Mr. Shaun Joshua in about 2 or 3 episodes. He's going to be back soon. But that's it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. And Brother Shaun, thank you very much for your valuable insights as always.
Yeah, thank you as well. I get a lot of time to brush myself. Also, sometimes even I learn something new. So yeah, I will be looking forward for the next one. Why not?
For sure, brother. Have a beautiful, beautiful night. Take care.